Welcome back, everyone, to this week's Sky Talk from the U46 School District Planetarium, the week of March 15th through the 22nd, 2021. It's the week of the vernal equinox, also known as the first day of spring. It's going to happen on March 20th this year. Before we go there, I want to remind you, if you were to look at the solar system from far away, it's flat. Like if you look at it from the top, you can see all the orbits as the planets revolve or circle around the sun. But if you were to hold the solar system on the side, all of those planets are pretty much along the same plane, or we could call it a plate. And what I mean is this flat plane. All the planets go along this plane. So as the Earth spins, as we move in our orbit and the Earth spins, all these planets seem to go across the sky in the same path, like a band across the sky. We call that path the ecliptic. So now let me switch to Stellarium and let's take a look at our ecliptic. I overlaid it here in pink. So this is the morning of March 20th, Saturday. And this is the path that the sun takes across the sky. Now, as the Earth spins, our view of that path shifts a little bit. And every day that we move in our orbit, every 24-hour period, the sun's in a slightly different spot on that ecliptic because we're going around the sun. It moves a little bit to the left every day, and 365 days later, it's back exactly where it started. So here's where it looks. This is what it looks like on March 20th. And notice the sun just came up here. We got 7:15 in the morning, and it's almost exactly due east, because that's what it does on the spring equinox. The sun rises almost exactly east and sets almost exactly west for everyone on planet Earth. And let's go ahead and go to noon. Let's watch this happen a little bit. So I'll fast forward so that we get to noon pretty quickly. Here's 8 a.m., 9 a.m. And when we get to noon, that's always where it's at the halfway point across the sky. So if you picture a line going from south all the way over your head to north behind me, that line is called the meridian. It's like a giant line of longitude in the sky. And because we just went to the time change, local noon is more like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So I'm going to stop it right there at 1 o'clock. And that's about how high the sun gets in the sky today. And it is going to set in the west. And as the day goes on, this ecliptic ends up more towards the due west. But there are also lines of longitude that we have in the background of the sky that scientists can calculate out. Like imagine the equator of the Earth. You know, we have an equator. It's towards our south. It's towards the South Pole. It's a belt around the fattest part of the Earth. And imagine projecting that straight out into the sky. Well, imagine if we did that not just for the equator, but for every line of latitude that goes all the way up to the North Pole. That would be at 90 degrees straight up and down to the South Pole. And we also labeled all the lines of longitude, like the lines that we picture going from the North Pole down to the South Pole. Just imagine that line out in space. Well, it might look something like this if you did that. And they're labeled on here. This plus 20 right here, that's not the equator. That's 20 degrees above the equator. Here's 10 degrees above. So this line right here is the celestial equator. It's the equator projected out into space. And look at that. The sun is right on the equator on March 20th. Yep. And then we also have these up and down lines. Well, these can be called hours of right ascension. And it's the left and right movement of an object in the sky. And if you go up, the H means hours. We measure it in hours. And there's 24 hours in a day. And lo and behold, that says 0H. And the sun is right on the 0 hour. Here's the 1 hour mark, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Those are all behind us. Here's 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. And we start all over again at 0 hour. And the sun moves about 1 hour every hour. The Earth spins so that the sun moves about this much in 1 hour. And it just so happens that on the spring equinox, that is where the sun, the ecliptic, when it hits that 0 hour marker, it's right at the equator. It will not all be lined up tomorrow or the next day or the next day or the next day or the next day. That won't be lined up like that again until the vernal equinox next year. As a matter of fact, I can show you if you want. I can go to April 20th. So this is March 20th. Let's go a month into the future, April 20th. Ready, set, go. Now look at that. Here is the equator, the celestial equator. Look where the sun is. It's well above it in April. They're not lined up anymore. And hey, the 0 hour, 3, 2, 1, the 0 hour is gone. Right now, we're on the 2 hour marker. We're on the 2 hour marker. Here's the 1 hour, 22, 23. This is the 1 HR right here. And so the sun has moved to the left on the ecliptic path, and we can measure that to the left and right with these hours, and we can measure it up and down with these latitude lines, or we are comparing it with the celestial equator. And just for grins, let's check 620. So on the summer day, if we line everything up, we're exactly at the 6 hour mark, and the sun is well above the equator, which is right here. This is the 0 mark, plus 20, plus 10, 0. So it's over 20 degrees above the equator. Well, let's see where it is in September. Oh, it's back down. It's back down. It's at the 12 hour mark, and it's on the equator again in September. That's another equinox day. Now take a guess. Where do you think it'll be on 12/20? Do you think the sun will be higher or lower at noon? Let's check it out. There's 12. There's December. And on December, well, we're back time change again. It would be more like really closer to noon. And look how low the sun is in the sky. That's noon. That's as high as it gets in the winter. It's at the 18 hour mark, and it is well below the equator. Here is the equator, the celestial equator in the sky, and the sun is actually below the equator. The sunlight at noon, direct sunlight at noon, is below the equator in December. So the height of the sun changes all year, and there's special days where we line them up with the ways that we've measured the sky. And 0 is like the beginning, I guess you could say, of the astronomical year as we measure it in hours of right ascension. So if I take this off and we go to tonight, so now I got to switch the date to March, and I'm starting on March 15th, and it will not get dark on March 15th until after, a little bit after 7 p.m. The sun's setting at about 7 o'clock, and it's rising at about 7 o'clock. And this purple line might get really distracting for us, or the pink line. So I'm going to actually just turn that off. And I'll leave the equinoxes and solstice marks on. And let's look and see what's going to happen tonight. We're going to let the sun set. And I think you can probably see that the moon is visible. Put it about right there. Right there is the moon. Oh, we wouldn't be able to see that really in the daytime. It's way too close to the sun on the 15th. It's going to get better each day because it's moving to the left. As the moon moves in its orbit around us, it always moves a little to the left. And we will be able to see it right after sunset this week. We've got a waxing crescent moon happening. So here we are at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 6:30. The sun actually sets at around 7. So that's where we are about right now. I'm still fast forwarding a little bit. And as it gets darker out, you'll be able to see the moon right at sunset. Right around 7 o'clock tonight, it might be really cool to go out and see that tiny little crescent. We just had a new moon a couple days ago, a day or two ago maybe, but it will get a little bit better each night. We'll watch where the moon's going to go this week in just a minute. So the sun completely sets. The sky starts to change. Here come the bright stars. I'm going to guess that that's Sirius, the brightest star in our sky. We got the planet Mars up here. Mars is the only visible planet in our evening sky. And We're at about 7:45, so I'm going to slow down time here. That little mark I put there, that's where the sun is along its ecliptic path when it is June. In June, the sun is way over here. It's going to set later, and we will not be able to see these stars in our summer sky after June, because these guys are all behind the sun at that time. But as of today, we can still see Orion the Hunter. There's Aldebaran. The star Aldebaran is the eye of Taurus the Bull. Right there it is. Mars is in between the bull and the Pleiades in its shoulder. Sirius is the nose of the hunting dog, nice and bright. And there is the winter triangle. Oh, we'll be able to see that all the way through April. Here are the lines if you like to see them. And then the drawings. And here are the names. The moon is in Pisces the fish tonight on the 15th. Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer are the next ones. That's the path of the ecliptic. That's the path that the sun goes through. The zodiac constellations are the ones that the sun goes through throughout the course of a year. So let me back up so we can see a little bit more in our sky. And let's turn our eyes, turn our bodies. Let's look to the left. So we're more like south-southeast. If I back up just a bit, there we go. We'll be able to see Gemini the twins, Cancer the crab, and of course Leo the lion. If we're out at 7:50, right when it's getting dark, it's still a little pink over here, but we can see Taurus the bull, Gemini the twins. You won't see Cancer the crab. The stars are not bright enough, but right there you'll be able to see the backwards question mark of Leo the lion. And all these constellations are up at 8 o'clock tonight. And as we head towards the north, keep spinning your body. Know that you will always be able to spot the Big and Little Dipper if you're facing exactly north. Now the sunset will be off to your left shoulder now, where the sun just went down. The Big Dipper stands out right away. That's part of the Big Dog. Use the last two stars in the saucepan to follow over here to the Little Dog. And if you keep going, you'll bump into that W, Cassiopeia the Queen. Cassiopeia the Queen. In the north, the bright star up there is Capella. That's a nice bright star in our March sky. So enjoy the longer days playing outside, but know that it's going to mean that you have to stay up a little bit later to be able to go out and observe the stars. But the weather is usually a little bit nicer in March than it is in January when our days are so short. So happy sky watching, and I will see you next week.